since we were just bringing up social media, and I'll add to that the search engines, you gave an example from Instagram, which I should note is owned by Meta, the parent company of Facebook, during the 2020 election, that when people search for information about Joe Biden, this was, I guess, for a 2-month period or so this happened, they would see positive stories about Donald Trump, but the opposite was not true. When people searched for Donald Trump, they did not see positive stories about Joe Biden. Instagram said this was a mistake. There was no intention there. But it does lead to a question of platform bias, which you address in the book. Should Google, which has a near monopolistic hold in the search engine industry, and the social media giants be subject to some type of regulation as it applies to that type of platform bias? And if so, what would it look like?
So this is a very difficult question. It's a great question. And I don't believe that we should have provisions that would, aside from very narrow things like the removal of false, empirically verifiable false speech about when, where, and how people vote, which would apply not just to social media companies, but to newspapers, it would apply across the board. I don't believe that we should say that these companies can't, say, tweak their algorithm to favor one candidate over another, in part because the platforms are tweaking their algorithms all the time, right? They're doing things that will make it so you'll find things that you want to find. And so you're not wasting your time, and you have to make value choices. So the fact that Facebook decides to promote or demote certain content or remove hate speech, which is not required under law, I mean, I think it's a business decision, because people would not want to see that. They would find Facebook less pleasant. They wouldn't go there. But there is a problem with bias. The way I suggest dealing with that is a law that would require some kind of disclosure about the algorithms. And if algorithms are being manipulated to favor one candidate or another, that this should have to be disclosed. It wouldn't have to be changed, but you'd know that the platform is biased. And that disclosure, as I said, most of my solutions involve giving more information to voters, more disclosure. And if it turns out that the platforms are too powerful, rather than having a speech code that says you can say this or you can't say that, you must be even-handed, I favor instead breaking up the platforms. If we think that Google search is so dominant and that people can't get information otherwise, then that suggests we have a problem with the market, right? The market power of Google. Another example of this is the decision that Facebook and Twitter made right after the January 6th insurrection to deplatform Donald Trump, which I think was the right decision. I think there should be a very heavy thumb on the scale against deplatforming a politician. We want to have rigorous speech. But when someone is consistently degrading the integrity of the election to the point that millions of people believe the false claim that it was stolen, or when they advocate violence or invite people to come for a wild time in Washington, D.C. at the time that Congress is counting the votes, I think that Trump's conduct easily passed the bar. Now, Facebook is going to have to make a decision, because that ban on Trump only applies for 2 years. And given the fact that Trump is continuing to say these things and the integrity of our election system is still being questioned for no good reason, I support extending that ban. But I wouldn't want a law that would say he can't speak. I wouldn't want a law that would say that Facebook can't include the content if it wants to. After all, there are other platforms, Gab, Parler, and now Truth Social, that will include Trump's content. That's fine. But I think as a matter of the public, we should pressure these companies into doing the right thing. What I don't support is this Florida law that was passed that says that a social media company cannot deplatform a candidate, even if that candidate calls for violence or that candidate continues to spew dangerous rhetoric about elections being stolen. I was actually shocked, and I spent a lot of time talking about law in the book and the interpretation of the First Amendment. I was actually shocked that Justice Clarence Thomas, who generally has taken a very libertarian position on speech, you can't even require disclosure in most circumstances of who's speaking in a campaign context, he says. He believes that Florida could pass a law that would say that Facebook has to carry Donald Trump if it doesn't, even if it doesn't want to.
And weren't they analogizing the social media companies to the telephone companies, essentially saying they're just carriers and they can't examine the content?
Right. So just like Verizon or AT&T can't say, well, you're a Nazi, I'm not going to let you have a phone. Justice Thomas and Professor Volokh have said that Fox News or the New York Times gets to decide what content to include or exclude. And I think that social media companies are much closer to that model. They exclude that hate speech. They decide what gets promoted, what gets demoted on their site. If Donald Trump were added back to Facebook on January 7th, 2023, when he's eligible, many people are going to protest and they're going to leave because that's not what they want to see. And of course, many people may protest and leave if he's not re-included, right? But that should be a private decision that's made, and people will think of Facebook differently, whether it includes Donald Trump content or doesn't, just like they would if, One America News Network includes Donald Trump content or doesn't.
Thanks for watching this video clip of the Speak Good podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, please check out our full conversations on your favorite podcast directory. We've spoken with everyone from the Secretary of the Smithsonian Institution about what it was like to be the founding director of the National Museum of African American History and Culture, to a member of Congress who describes his day job as being in the wrestling ring, to an expert storyteller who helps us understand how we can use stories to help us achieve our business goals. Thanks for watching.